Welcome to our deep dive, into the world of Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison.
You've sent us a whole collection of sources about him wanting to go beyond the usual, light bulb guy narrative.
Right.
And it's a fantastic choice
Yeah.
because honestly, his story is way more complex
Oh, yeah.
and fascinating than most people realize.
Absolutely.
We've got biographical excerpts, historical analyses,
Right.
all hinting at a life full of struggles, triumphs, and a lasting impact that we're still feeling today.
I think what's really fascinating here is you've hit on a figure who's especially relevant in our current age of, tech giants and rapid innovation.
Oh, interesting.
There are definite parallels between Edison's world and the Silicon Valley scene we see now.
Uh-huh.
This relentless drive to invent, build empires, and disrupt industries.
Okay, so we're not just talking about a historical figure here, but someone whose story can teach us something about the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
I'm intrigued. Before we jump into his inventions, though, the sources mention that Edison had a really unusual childhood and education or lack thereof.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's almost hard to believe, but he only had about 3 months of formal schooling.
What?
His teacher actually called him addled.
Oh my goodness.
But instead of seeing this as a setback, his mother, who was a former teacher herself, took charge of his education.
So instead of a traditional classroom, he had a sort of DIY education.
Exactly. And this really shaped his whole approach to learning and problem solving.
Okay.
He was all about practical knowledge, learning by doing, tinkering, experimenting, rather than just absorbing theory from books.
Right.
He devoured books on his own, but always applied what he read to hands-on projects.
Yeah.
This fostered in him a lifelong belief that knowledge was only valuable if you could put it to use.
That's so interesting. It makes me think about how I learn best, too.
Right.
I definitely feel like I grasp things more quickly when I can actually apply them to real-life situations. But let's get back to Edison. The sources also mention that he wasn't an overnight success, right?
Definitely.
There were quite a few bumps in the road before he hit it big.
Before Menlo Park and the iconic light bulb, there was a string of inventions that flopped,
Yeah.
some comically. So, for example, one of his early creations was an automatic vote recorder.
A vote recorder.
Yeah.
What went wrong with that?
Well,
Sounds pretty useful.
you have to consider the political climate of the time.
Okay.
Politicians weren't exactly lining up to have their every vote tracked and potentially used against them.
Right.
They saw it as a threat, and the invention never really gained traction.
I guess some things never change.
Right.
Politicians and technology, always a bit of a dance. But these setbacks must have taught him valuable lessons, right?
Absolutely. These early failures played a crucial role in shaping Edison's character.
Uh-huh.
They instilled in him a resilience that would become one of his greatest assets.
Right.
He learned to embrace failure, to see it not as a defeat, but as a necessary step on the path to success.
So it's like that saying, fail fast, fail often.
Exactly.
He wasn't afraid to experiment, even if it meant things didn't always work out as planned.
Right.
And this brings us to what many consider the turning point in Edison's career, the creation of his famous Menlo Park laboratory.
Yeah.
From what I gather, this wasn't your typical workshop or inventor's den.
Right.
This was something much bigger and more significant, right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Menlo Park was groundbreaking in many ways. It was a purpose-built facility designed to be a hub of innovation, a place where invention could happen at an unprecedented pace.
Wow.
Edison understood that he couldn't do it all alone. He was brilliant, but he knew that to truly achieve his ambitious goals, he needed to harness the power of collaboration.
So he was like the original team builder.
You could say that.
Right.
He assembled a team of incredibly talented individuals, engineers, chemists, machinists, you name it, and he brought them together in this incredible space where they could work side by side, bouncing ideas off each other and pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
That's incredible. It's like he was creating a mini Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley even existed.
Yeah.
This collaborative approach is so common in tech and research today, but back then it must have been revolutionary.
It was.
It really challenges the whole myth of the lone genius, right?
It does. And this is one of the key insights I think we can take away from Edison's story,
Oh.
that innovation often thrives in environments where collaboration and diversity of thought are valued.
This makes me wonder, did this collaborative spirit extend to other inventors of the time? Was Edison open to working with or learning from his contemporaries, or was he more of a lone wolf?
Well, that's a great question, and it leads us to one of the most famous and perhaps infamous chapters in Edison's story,
Okay.
the War of Currents.
Okay, now we're getting to the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
This is where Nikola Tesla enters the picture, right?
Yes.
From what I know, there was some serious competition between these two.
There was indeed. It was a clash of titans fueled by ambition, ego, and fundamentally different visions for the future of electricity. You see, after the success of the light bulb, the next big challenge was figuring out how to get this newfound power to homes and businesses.
Right.
This meant building the infrastructure for large-scale power distribution.
Makes sense. You can have the most brilliant invention in the world, but if you can't get it to the people who need it, it's useless.
Precisely. And this is where the battle lines were drawn.
Okay.
Edison championed a system called direct current, or DC, which worked well over short distances. But a brilliant young inventor named Nikola Tesla, who had actually briefly worked for Edison,
Really?
came up with a competing system called alternating current, or AC.
I've heard of AC/DC, of course, but can you explain the difference in simple terms?
Sure.
I'm not exactly an electrical engineer.
Imagine a river flowing in one direction. That's DC.
Okay.
It's steady and reliable, but it loses power quickly over long distances.
Okay.
Now imagine a wave in the ocean going up and down that's
Okay,
AC.
got it.
It can travel much farther without losing as much energy.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So Tesla's AC was better for powering large cities and spreading electricity across vast distances.
Exactly. It was a game changer. But Edison, who had invested heavily in DC infrastructure, wasn't about to let his system be overshadowed.
Of course not.
He saw AC as a threat and launched a campaign to discredit it sometimes, using some pretty questionable tactics.
Wait, what do you mean by questionable?
Well, Edison went to great lengths to demonstrate the supposed dangers of AC. He even publicly electrocuted animals to try to sway public opinion.
That's pretty intense. I mean, I get that competition can be fierce, but electrocuting animals?
Yep.
That seems a bit over the top. It makes you wonder what Edison would have done in today's world of social media and 247 news cycles.
It's definitely a different era, and some of his tactics wouldn't fly today.
Right.
But it speaks to how much was at stake.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a scientific debate. It was a battle for control of a burgeoning industry with the potential to reshape the world.
So who ultimately won the War of Currents? I'm guessing AC won out, since that's what powers our homes today.
Right.
But I'm curious about how it all played out.
Yeah.
Did this rivalry affect Edison's career or reputation in any way?
Well, that's a great question, and I think we should probably pick up there next time.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
We'll dive back into this War of Currents and explore more of Edison's fascinating journey in our next installment.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so we left off with this epic battle between AC and DC.
Edison and Tesla.
Edison and Tesla.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was a pretty pivotal moment in the history of electricity.
It was.
Kind of like a fork in the road that determined how our entire electrical grid would be set up.
Right.
Did this War of Currents tarnish Edison's reputation at all, or did he manage to bounce back?
Well, it's interesting because even though Tesla's AC system ultimately won out, Edison's reputation didn't really suffer in the long run.
Okay.
He had already established himself as a brilliant inventor and savvy businessman.
Right.
And he continued to make significant contributions even after the defeat in the War of Currents.
That makes sense. It's like even if you lose a battle, the war isn't over.
Right.
He must have had an incredible ability to adapt and move on to the next challenge.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that even while this very public battle over electricity was raging, Edison's mind was already racing ahead to other groundbreaking inventions.
Really?
In fact, in the midst of all this, he gave the world something truly revolutionary. The phonograph.
The phonograph, you mean like the old record players?
Yes.
I remember my grandparents had one. It was this huge, clunky thing with a big horn on top.
That's it.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine now in our world of streaming music and digital audio. But back in 1877, when Edison unveiled this device that could actually record and play back sound, it was nothing short of mind-blowing. People literally thought it was magic.
It's still mind-blowing to me. I mean, think about it for the first time in human history.
Right.
You could capture sound, this ephemeral thing that just vanishes into thin air, and preserve it, replay it whenever you want it. It's like he bottled sound.
That's a great way to put it. And it wasn't just capturing sound.
Right.
It was opening up a whole new world of possibilities. It revolutionized how people experienced music, allowing them to listen to their favorite artists and songs whenever they wanted without having to attend a live performance.
Oh, wow.
It changed social gatherings, too. Imagine for the first time people could gather around a machine in their living room and listen to music together.
It's like he invented the first iPod, and all those music streaming services we use today, they all owe their existence in a way to that first phonograph, right?
Absolutely. It was a pivotal moment in the history of music and entertainment.
Yeah.
It's hard to overstate the impact it had.
Wow.
It democratized access to music, paving the way for mass entertainment industries and shaping the soundscape of the modern world.
Mm,
It even influenced how we communicate.
really? How so?
Well, think about it. The phonograph was essentially the first audio recording and playback device. It laid the groundwork for all sorts of future technologies, like telephones, radio, and eventually the internet.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. It's like he set off a chain reaction of innovation that continues to this day. But let's get back to Edison. The sources mention that he wasn't just a brilliant inventor.
Right.
He was also a savvy businessman.
Yeah.
He understood that to truly change the world, his inventions needed to reach a mass audience.
You're absolutely right. Edison was a master of both invention and entrepreneurship.
Hmm,
He realized early on that the success of an invention depended not just on its ingenuity, but also on its commercial viability.
right.
He needed to make his inventions practical, affordable, and accessible to the masses.
So he was kind of like the Steve Jobs of his era,
There are definitely parallels.
combining technical brilliance with a keen sense of how to bring a product to market.
Edison was incredibly skilled at building companies and establishing entire industries around his inventions. A prime example of this is the founding of General Electric, or GE as we know it today.
Ugh, GE. That's a name that's synonymous with innovation and technology.
Right.
It's hard to imagine our world without all the appliances and products they've created over the years.
Exactly, and it all traces back to Edison's vision.
Hmm.
He recognized that to scale up his operations, to manufacture and distribute his inventions on a global scale, he needed to create a powerful company. The founding of GE in 1892 was a pivotal moment not just for Edison's own career, but for the future of technology and industry.
That's incredible. Thinking about GE and all the other tech giants that shape our world today, it makes me wonder, did Edison have any mentors or role models who inspired his own entrepreneurial spirit?
That's a good question.
Or was he just kind of this one-of-a-kind, self-made innovator?
Well, while Edison was undoubtedly a unique individual, it's important to remember that he didn't operate in a vacuum.
Right.
He was influenced by the intellectual and cultural currents of his time, and there were certainly other figures who inspired him and shaped his thinking.
So who were some of these influential figures?
One figure who stands out is Michael Faraday, a brilliant British scientist who made groundbreaking discoveries in electromagnetism. Faraday's work laid the foundation for many of Edison's own inventions, including the electric generator and motor.
Oh.
In fact, Edison deeply admired Faraday and even kept a portrait of him in his laboratory.
That's fascinating. It shows that even someone as innovative as Edison recognized the importance of building upon the work of those who came before him.
Exactly. Innovation is rarely a solo endeavor.
Yeah.
It's often about taking existing ideas and refining them, combining them in new ways, and finding practical applications for them. Edison was a master at this.
It makes you wonder what Faraday would have thought of Edison's work.
Right.
Would he have been impressed or maybe even a little intimidated by his entrepreneurial drive?
It's fun to speculate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I imagine Faraday would have been fascinated by Edison's ability to take scientific principles and turn them into practical, world-changing inventions.
Speaking of world-changing inventions, we can't forget about Edison's role in the birth of motion pictures. I know we touched on this earlier, but I'm curious to delve a little deeper into this aspect of his career.
It's another fascinating chapter in Edison's story, and one that often gets overshadowed by his other inventions.
Right.
But it's crucial to understand how he helped shape the early film industry, laying the groundwork for the cinematic world we know today.
Okay, so I know about the light bulb, the Phonograph Now movies.
Yeah.
This guy was like a one-man revolution. Tell me more about how he got involved in the world of moving pictures. Did he just wake up one day and decide, hey, I think I'll invent movies now?
Well, not exactly, remember. Edison was always fascinated by the possibilities of technology to capture and reproduce reality. He was always looking for ways to push the boundaries of what was possible.
So it was a natural progression from the phonograph, which captured sound, to trying to capture images in motion.
Precisely in the late 1880s, Edison and his team began experimenting with ways to create moving pictures. They built upon the work of other inventors and photographers. But it was Edison who ultimately developed a practical system for recording and displaying motion pictures.
And this system led to the creation of the kinetoscope, right?
That's right. The kinetoscope developed in Edison's lab in 1891 was a groundbreaking device that allowed individuals to view moving pictures through a peephole.
I've seen pictures of those early kinetoscopes.
Yeah.
They look so primitive compared to our modern movie theaters with their giant screens and surround sound.
They were certainly rudimentary, but at the time they were absolutely revolutionary. Imagine the wonder people must have felt seeing images come to life for the first time. It must have felt like magic.
It's incredible to think that something as commonplace as watching a movie today has its roots in these early experimental devices. But I'm curious, did Edison see the commercial potential of motion pictures right away?
Well,
Or did it take a while for him to grasp the impact this new medium would have?
Edison ever, the astute businessman, recognized the entertainment value of motion pictures early on.
He saw the potential for creating a whole new industry around this technology.
So he wasn't just content with inventing the technology, he wanted to control the entire ecosystem around it from production to distribution.
You could say that in 1894, he formed the Edison Manufacturing Company, which produced short films and pioneered many of the techniques that would shape the early film industry. He even built the first movie studio in the United States known as the Black Maria.
Wow, the first movie studio.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. So Edison wasn't just an inventor, he was also a movie mogul shaping the very foundations of Hollywood. But I've read that Edison's involvement in the film industry wasn't without controversy.
Right.
Something about the Edison Trust.
You're right. As the film industry grew, Edison attempted to exert control over the production and distribution of movies.
Uh-huh.
He formed the Motion Picture Patents Company, known as the Edison Trust, which aimed to enforce his patents and limit competition.
So he was trying to become the gatekeeper of the movie industry, essentially. Yeah. In a way, yes, he wanted to ensure that he and his company profited from the burgeoning film market, but independent filmmakers resisted his efforts. And eventually, the Edison Trust crumbled. It's a reminder that innovation often thrives in the face of attempts to control and restrict it.
It's fascinating how this theme of control and competition seems to run throughout Edison's story, from the War of Currents to his attempts to dominate the film industry.
It's a reflection of the times, really.
Right.
This was an era of rapid technological advancement and industrialization, and there was intense competition to control these emerging markets.
Okay, so we've covered Edison's groundbreaking inventions, his relentless work ethic, his successes, his setbacks, his attempts to control entire industries. It's clear that he was a complex and ambitious figure, but I'm curious to learn more about the man behind the inventions. What about his personal life, his relationships, his passions outside of the lab? The sources hint at a man so driven by his work that other aspects of his life may have suffered. Is that accurate? It's fascinating to think about all that Edison accomplished, the inventions, the companies, the sheer scope of his impact. But it makes me wonder, did it all come at a personal cost?
Yeah, that's a really important point. You can't separate the work from the person, especially with someone as driven as Edison. He was notorious for working incredibly long hours, often neglecting his personal life in the pursuit of his goals.
There's that famous quote attributed to him, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." Sounds like he really lived by that. But what was that like for his family to have this larger-than-life figure, this genius inventor, as a husband and father?
It was definitely a mixed bag, according to the sources. On one hand, there was a sense of pride and awe. Mary, his first wife, must have felt like she was a part of something historic, witnessing firsthand the birth of these groundbreaking inventions. But on the other hand, there was the constant absence. The feeling that she was sharing her husband with the world with his work.
It's almost like he was married to his inventions, and Mary was left to manage the household and raise their children largely on her own right.
That's the picture that emerges from the sources. And tragically, Mary passed away quite young in 1884. There's speculation that the stress and strain of living with Edison's intense work ethic, the constant demands on his time, may have contributed to her decline.
That's heartbreaking. It makes you wonder if amidst all his success, Edison ever regretted his choices, if he felt he'd sacrificed too much of his personal life.
It's impossible to know for sure what went on in his mind. He did remarry a few years later to Mina Miller, and by all accounts it was a happier relationship, but even then his work remained central to his life.
It seems the drive to invent, to constantly push the boundaries of what's possible, came at a price. It makes you think about the nature of genius, the sacrifices it often demands, not only from the individual, but also from those closest to them.
It's a timeless dilemma, isn't it? The struggle to find balance between ambition and personal life, between the pursuit of greatness and the fulfillment of our personal responsibilities. Even today, with all our technology and supposed work-life balance strategies, it's a challenge many people face.
It's a good reminder that success, however we define it, shouldn't come at the expense of our own well-being and the well-being of those we love.
Exactly. And it's interesting because even though Edison himself didn't talk much about regret, some sources suggest that later in life he did express a wish that he'd spent more time with his family.
It makes him seem more human, more relatable, don't you think? To know that even this towering figure, this icon of innovation, grappled with the same basic human desires for connection, for family, for a sense of balance.
Absolutely. It reminds us that behind the inventions, the patents, the accolades, there is a real person with feelings, regrets, and a longing for a life perhaps less extraordinary, but more fulfilling on a personal level.
And speaking of relatable flaws, the sources also point out that Edison wasn't always right, despite his visionary thinking. He sometimes missed the mark. There's that whole thing about him resisting wireless communication, right?
That's right. He invested so much in wired infrastructure that he initially dismissed the potential of wireless technology. He even famously said wireless is a fad.
Yeah.
It's a good example of how even the most brilliant minds can get stuck in their ways, blinded by their own past successes.
It's like he was so focused on what he knew, what had worked for him in the past, that he couldn't see the possibilities of something completely new and different. It's a reminder that even geniuses have their blind spots.
And it's a valuable lesson for all of us, isn't it? To stay open to new possibilities, to avoid clinging too tightly to our own perspectives, even when those perspectives have served us well in the past.
It's about having that humility to recognize that we don't have all the answers, that there's always more to learn, always new ways of seeing the world.
Exactly, and that brings us back to one of my favorite Edison quotes, the one we've touched on a few times already. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
It's such a powerful statement about the importance of perseverance, of embracing failure as part of the learning process. It's about not giving up even when things get tough.
Exactly. It's about seeing setbacks not as defeats, but as stepping stones on the path to success. It's about understanding that innovation is rarely a straight line. It's a messy, iterative process full of twists, turns, and unexpected detours.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Thomas Edison, what are some key takeaways? What can we learn from this complex and fascinating figure?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is the power of curiosity. That insatiable desire to learn and explore Edison was driven by a relentless curiosity about the world, a desire to understand how things worked and how they could be made better. And this curiosity fueled his lifelong pursuit of innovation.
And it wasn't just about having ideas, it was about putting those ideas into action, about experimenting, tinkering, failing, and trying again until he found a solution.
Exactly. He was a master of learning, of embracing failure as a necessary part of the creative process. And he understood the power of collaboration, bringing together talented individuals and fostering a culture of innovation.
But we also saw the human side of Edison, the personal sacrifices he made, the relationships that suffered under the weight of his ambition. It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds are still human, with all the complexities and contradictions that come with being human.
His story is a cautionary tale about the importance of balance, the need to nurture not only our professional pursuits, but also our personal connections and well-being. And it's a reminder that even geniuses have their limitations, their blind spots, and that staying open to new ideas is essential for continued growth and evolution.
So as we go about our day, our week, our lives, think about the lessons we've uncovered here. How can we tap into that Edison spirit of curiosity, resilience, and collaboration in our own pursuits? How can we turn setbacks into opportunities for learning and growth? How can we find that sweet spot between ambition and well-being?
Those are great questions to ponder. Edison's story doesn't offer easy answers, but it challenges us to think deeply about how we approach our own lives, our work, and our relationships.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of Thomas Edison. We hope you've come away with a deeper appreciation for this complex and brilliant figure, and that his story inspires you to embrace your own potential for innovation, creativity, and resilience.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop learning.